I've always found it ironic that we use the word virtuosic for excellent musicians, but when they are a little too good, a little too far ahead of their time, history accuses them of exactly the opposite. The virtuoso must work diligently to achieve their skill, but when we can't understand how the effort we see at point A gets them to point B, we immediately jump to the supernatural. He must have sold his soul to the devil. I would say a deal with the devil is probably about as far from virtuous as you can get. Not only is it a betrayal to whatever deity you choose to believe in, but it's also a betrayal of humanity itself by making a deal for something you didn't earn. I would say most of us these days don't actually believe that these people sold their souls, but yet this legend still persists. Why? Where does it come from? And why can it be found across hundreds of years in many different genres of music? The origin of this legend, as you might expect, comes from the Bible. The devil is of course associated with many evil things, but temptation seems to always be near the top of his list. Satan tempts Jesus with all of the kingdoms in the world in exchange for worship and allegiance. And obviously Jesus wasn't looking for musical gain here, and he didn't take the devil up on his deal. But this gives us an insight on how the devil works, at least in these stories. He doesn't force you, he tempts you. He makes it a transaction. This sets the foundations for musicians selling their souls, but the story that really hammers it home is the legend of Faust. Faust apparently was not a very likable guy. He was known as a con man and a bragger to all of his peers. But the things that he would brag about are a little nuts, especially for the 16th century. He claimed that he could use a crystal ball to read the future, and he could read your palm and predict your fate. And he claimed that he was capable of performing miracles that surpassed Christ himself. And he would throw in that he was also the most learned chemist and astrologer of his time. Pretty impressive guy. In around 1540, he was found dead, and his body was heavily mutilated, almost as if he had been ripped apart. After seeing the state of his body, a rumor started that he had made a deal with the devil. He exchanged his soul for all of his supernatural abilities. And this scene of his torn apart body was the devil coming to collect on his debt. It's way more likely that he died in an explosion while doing one of his crazy experiments, but people didn't want to hear that part. The legend of Faust has inspired hundreds of books, plays, pieces of music, and other forms of media, all with their own variations on the story. So it's clear that people were both terrified and fascinated by the idea of making deals with the devil. And I'm sure you can see the parallels here. If the alchemist can gain supernatural abilities from the devil, why can't a musician?
If you're enjoying this video, please consider checking out my Patreon. You get early and ad-free access to all future uploads for just $2 a month.
The violin has always had a strange connection to the devil, much more than any other instrument. I've never heard of the devil's contrabassonist, or a person trading their soul for trombone virtuosity, and that's because of two separate but very important stories. The first is of Tartini and his G minor sonata, nicknamed the Devil's Trill Sonata, which was the piece that I was playing at the beginning, if you didn't catch that. Tartini claimed that one night in 1713, he had a dream where the devil came to visit with him. Tartini made a deal with the devil to exchange his soul for servitude and music lessons. Wanting to test the skill of his newly appointed teacher, Tartini handed his violin to the devil, and the devil played what he described as the most beautiful music that he had ever heard, with such skill and artistry that it was unbelievable. Tartini awoke from the dream and tried to transcribe exactly what the devil had played for him, but he admits that he could only capture a small amount of the magic. This work was thought to be near impossible at the time it was written, and is still performed as a showpiece to this day. The piece was not actually published until 30 years after his death, which added to the mystery behind it. Also, he claimed that the piece was composed in 1713, but based on musicologists' estimations, it's likely written in the 1740s. And to be honest, this is probably the most believable of all the legends. He claims that it happened in a dream, and all he claimed was inspiration. But Tartini's Devil's Trill Sonata was just a stepping stone for what was to come. Niccolo Paganini, out of all musicians, at least before the 20th century, is the most synonymous with selling their soul to the devil. Any other musician that has ever been accused of this probably has Paganini to thank for it. Paganini's virtuosity is legendary. He was so far ahead of everyone else at this time that the only explanation that they could think of is that he was supernatural. He was hands down the best when he was alive, and even to this day is considered to be one of the best in history. His compositions are so difficult that they have stood the test of time and are still considered some of the most challenging pieces in the violin's repertoire. Even to this day, if you want to get into the best music schools or festivals in the world, you can bet that you're going to be playing some Paganini at your audition. But what made him so infamous was not just his virtuosity, but the fact that he actually leaned into this demonic narrative. He knew that many people around him were spreading rumors that he had supernatural abilities, and instead of trying to fight it, he leaned into it like a modern-day black metal band. He would show up to his concerts in an all-black carriage, pulled by black horses, and dressed in all black from head to toe. He would accent his already strange appearance with long black hair, a long black cape, and blue glasses. On stage, he would purposely convulse and twitch to act as if he was possessed. He would use lighting and pyrotechnic effects that made it seem like ghosts, and the devil himself was on stage with him. He would pull stunts, such as purposely breaking his strings during concerts, starting a piece with all four and finishing with just one. And he would hide his scores and the music he wrote from other musicians. He would keep them locked away in a safe to make it appear like he had some kind of forbidden knowledge. Paganini's audience was both terrified and fascinated by him, and this led to him selling out concerts regularly, with no problem, making him an incredible amount of money that he typically spent on gambling and opium. There's even an entire movie that went into the antics of Paganini called The Devil's Violinist. Paganini took this deal with the devil and turned it into a marketing strategy, but the truth was that he earned his virtuosity, with a little bit of help from his genetics. It has been reported that in his early years, he was put on a strict practice routine of 12 to 15 hours per day. And not only was he a violin virtuoso, but he was also a very accomplished guitarist.
He was also most likely affected by Ehlers-Danlos syndrome,
which led to his strange appearance but gave him a unique advantage on the violin. This was a connective tissue disorder that allowed him an incredible amount of flexibility in his hands, which meant that he was able to reach further than anyone else without shifting, allowing him to play things that other people just found impossible. Paganini was truly the first rock star, and this use of controversy as a marketing technique would be repeated over and over with the invention of rock and roll in the 20th century. Paganini may have invented the attitude of a rock star, but Robert Johnson provided its musical backbone. The legend of Robert Johnson at the Crossroads is probably the most famous example in American history. Legend has it that Robert Johnson, who started off as a very mediocre blues guitarist, was laughed off stage one night while playing at a club. After suffering this embarrassment, he went to the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61 outside of Clarksdale, Mississippi, and was approached by a mysterious black figure, believed to be the devil. This figure offered to tune Robert's guitar for him, and when it was returned to Robert, he was given the devil's blues guitar skill. Robert then disappeared for 3 years. After this, he had returned back to the same club that he had previously been laughed off stage at, and he blew the crowd away with his skill. It was said that Robert's skill was such that he was able to emulate an entire band at once. He could play the bass line, the chords, the melody, and sing all at the same time. And remember, this was the 1930s. The guitar, especially in the American South, did not have the rich history full of virtuosos that we have today. His skill would have been actually unbelievable to many people at the time. And his technical innovations both on the instrument and in the blues genre was the foundation for rock and roll, and all of its personalities that came with it over the past century. Unfortunately, his life was cut pretty short. At the age of 27, he died of unknown causes, becoming the first member of the infamous 27 Club. And many believed that this early and mysterious death was the devil coming to collect his due. But there's a huge problem with this story. More than likely, this is not a story he told, and he never claimed that it happened to him. There was another blues musician, a singer named Tommy Johnson, who was not related to Robert at all, that told the exact same story about himself. Tommy was not as well recognized as Robert during his time, and it seems that the rumor that he started about himself got put onto Robert without him ever claiming it. Because they both had the same last name and were both looking for blues success, it's possible that people just mixed them up. People view some of the song titles and lyrics from Robert as him leaning into this devil narrative, similar to how Paganini did. But there's probably another explanation. Blues, during his lifetime, was viewed as the devil's music. It had a horrible reputation in the American South, both with white and black Baptists. When his first wife and child both died during childbirth, her family blamed him, saying that this was God's punishment for him playing the devil's music. So that gives you an idea about the level of paranoia. And obviously in the 1920s and 30s, black Americans were facing Jim Crow, segregation, poverty, and a pretty strong feeling of general racism from the public. So it's not a stretch to think that he may have felt like everyone actually believed that he was evil, even if he hadn't made a deal with the devil. Robert's family is not a fan of this legend, both because they don't want to be associated with Satan, and because this legend takes away from Robert's true skill and all the work he actually did. What really happened in those years he disappeared is that he got a good teacher and worked his ass off, often playing and practicing all night long in a graveyard, just to get to where he wanted to go. And just like Paganini, Robert earned his virtuosity. Stop giving the devil so much credit. Once these legends began being spread into popular culture with the advent of rock and roll, the floodgates were opened. Every musician and their mother had sold their soul to the devil. John Lennon made the deal, Bon Jovi made the deal, Black Sabbath was satanic, and even Katy Perry claimed to have made the deal. Listen to this interview snippet with folk rock legend Bob Dylan.
I mean, I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my hand.
Did I ask who you made the bargain with?
With the chief commander, and on this earth, and then in a world we can't see.
He's clearly alluding to Satan here. Every time the story comes up of somebody making a deal with the devil, it's disproven, from Faust to Robert Johnson. But this legend just won't die. Why? Well, the easiest answer is that it offers a simple solution to things that we have a hard time explaining, and it gives us an easy way out of things that we feel like we couldn't accomplish. If I believe that Paganini was only that good because he had supernatural powers, that gives me an excuse to never have to try and compete with him. If I believe that the Beatles are only as influential as they are because of Satan, I don't have to face the fact that they got there through sheer hard work, and that I too am capable of that with enough effort and time. Music is not magic, and success and skill is not gifted. It is earned. Sure, sometimes luck can be involved, being in the right place at the right time, but every single person you could think of that has been accused of selling their soul had to work extremely hard to get to where they are. Satan had nothing to do with it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and check out my Patreon. See you next week.